All right, welcome to another episode of NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we were talking about the Miami Dolphins, and I am joined by Dolphins podcaster DouglieDoWrong. How's it going?
It's going good, going really good. I'm very happy to be on here.
It's tough to, see when the Super Bowl ends. We don't have, official football. We got always have something to talk about, especially, in the NFL and especially with the Dolphins. But before we get to that, I just wanted to obviously congratulate you, 31,000 plus YouTube subscribers. And you've been doing this since 2018 then?
Yeah, I started the very beginning of free agency. I think even a little bit before that in 2018. I think my first video was talking about the Dolphins trading Jarvis Landry. So yeah, I've been doing this for 4 years now. Loving it. I have a degree in media. I got my bachelor's degree in film and audio. So diehard Dolphins fan. I live up in New Jersey, and I get a lot of my Dolphin intake from the national media, NFL Network and ESPN. And whenever the Dolphins would beat a team, say they beat the Patriots, the Steelers, any of those hot teams at that time, it'd always be how that team lost versus what the Dolphins did to win. I get real sick and tired of it. So I was like, let me take my degree, put it with what I love, and start spreading the good news or spreading the truth, I guess you could say. And yeah, I've been doing it for 4 years, and I'm very happy. And I'm growing. So, and I appreciate everyone who's followed me and subscribed. Can't do it without the viewers. So,
Absolutely. And, it's always good to have something to talk about. The Dolphins, there's not a shortage of things to talk about. And let's just kind of get right into, the main topic for the present and the future of the Dolphins. Can Tua lead the Dolphins to the Super Bowl? And then what do you see, maybe his strengths being and maybe what he needs to work on?
So that's a good question. That's the question that a lot of Dolphin fans fight over, argue over. He's got it. He doesn't have it. He sucks. He's a bust. We should get rid of him. This is and this is not really, it's like a saying of what Tua could be or his ceiling. But here's my thought process. If Trent Dilfer can win a Super Bowl, why can't Tua win a Super Bowl? Nick Foles won a Super Bowl. Rich Gannon won a Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, Tua can lead the Dolphins to the Super Bowl. And when it comes to his strengths and his weaknesses, right? A lot of people, nitpick certain things with Tua. Talking about, check down Tua is a thing I hear a lot. Tua turned the ball over. It's a thing I hear a lot. Even though his accuracy and his completion percentage and everything is really high, it's one of the top in the NFL. He is inconsistent. That is my biggest knock, coming from an unbiased, person who breaks down his film and looks at everything. He's inconsistent. He will make throws that you say to yourself, that's it. That's what you need from your franchise quarterback. Made a beautiful throw to Waddle against the Titans, against the Ravens. Made beautiful throws to Devante Parker, Isaiah Ford against the Jets. Just drops it right in there, right in the bucket on a corner routes, post routes, all this stuff. And then he'll throw stupid interceptions. And then he'll be inaccurate on the move. He'll miss open deep passes and decide to throw to checkdowns. He's inconsistent. I've seen him have a pocket crumble around him on 3rd and 15 and throw first down to Jaylen Waddle. I've seen him stay in the pocket, get blasted in the face, and at the same time throw a perfect pass to Waddle with 2 defenders on him for a touchdown. But then he misses those like the next series, and you're just like, you just did that. Why can't you consistently do that? That is his biggest knock, is he's inconsistent. It is what it is. Could it be the offense and the offensive line messing with him because his timing's off, because he doesn't know if he's going to get good blocking this year? I don't know, but that's my biggest knock on him, inconsistencies. But to say he can't make the throws, I don't believe that, because I've seen him do it.
Well, yeah, and it's so interesting. I mean, you have this even with the Eagles, in Jalen Hurts.
Yep.
I mean, they're young, right? Even Peyton Manning was making young mistakes. And I mean, is it just kind of the media cycle now? People want to win now. I mean, is that why the Dolphins fan are kind of out on Tua, or is it a little bit of residual from maybe Ryan Tannehill kind of aftershock as well?
It's a combination, because, with Ryan Tannehill, he got 7 years, and he was coddled for 7 years. As much as there's Tannehill fans still around that want to, push back on that saying, Tannehill was coddled. They brought his head coach in as an offensive coordinator. They
Mhm.
did everything and anything to keep him. Oh, don't, he even had the story of him yelling at the practice squad that they don't get paid enough when they were taunting him for throwing interceptions. Coddled. The guy was coddled, never brought in competition, just given the keys. Once Garrard went down, boom. With the Tua situation, before he had the hip injury, he was a can't miss prospect. He was
Mhm.
going to come in, be the next best thing, going to light it up. He had the hip injury, came in, wasn't the best thing. And all of a sudden now Dolphin fans were like, oh, you said this and national media said this and yada, yada. But you're 100% right. Look at Peyton Manning. He was garbage his freshman year. Look at Josh Allen. His first 2 years, his inaccuracy was ridiculous. Patrick Mahomes throwing
Mhm.
interceptions his first game. It happens. Russell Wilson was almost benched his second game ever playing. So
Mm.
it happens. The thing is, the patience, like you said, it's been 23 years now since Dan Marino's played. We've had how many different quarterbacks? It's the impatience also. It's that looming of Deshaun Watson where now all of a
Mm.
sudden we could have a top 5 quarterback. Why are we sticking with a guy which we don't know who he can be? It's all those things accumulating. Now people, I would say that the majority of Dolphin fans like Tua. I've done a few surveys, and I would say it always came down to like 75% want to keep Tua, think he can be something, and about 25-30% are done with him and want to move on. So it's majority like him. But there are those fans that are like, I'm done. I've seen what I need to see, and I'm ready to move on.
Well, yeah, and you look at quarterback. That's really the position. I mean, that matters in the NFL.
Mhm.
If you don't have that right, you got to move on. And I was listening to national radio guy, and he said, even when you look at the Jets, they messed up on Sam Darnold. But
Mhm.
is it a wasted pick then to go back a few years, then with Zach Wilson? I'm not in on Zach Wilson. I would say, I'm more in on Tua than Zach Wilson,
Mhm.
with all the tools. But I mean, if you don't, get it right, say Zach Wilson fails with the Jets, they have to just keep drafting
Keep doing it.
until you get it right. And so when you look at the Dolphins, now, I mean, with you've got Jaylen Waddle, you got a fantastic receiver there. I'm not sure about the other receivers, but looking at one of the weapons, the biggest weapons the Dolphins have, what makes Jaylen Waddle so good?
First off, agree with you on Zach Wilson. I think he
Hmm.
was coddled by Boise State having the best offensive line in the nation, and I
Yeah.
talked about that pre-draft, but he's gonna see how the NFL really is.
Hmm.
What makes Waddle good is his intangibles.
Hmm.
He Once he starts getting in the groove, he's dangerous. He's incredibly dangerous. His speed, his elusiveness, and the way he can get yards after carry are dangerous. But I started noticing something with Waddle. It took him a minute. It takes rookies a minute. Everyone wants
Hmm.
rookies to come out and be the next hot thing. People thought that Jalen Phillips sucked, and now all of a sudden he had 8.5 sacks, broke the Miami Dolphin rookie sack record. It takes a minute. He ran a route. I think it was against the Panthers, where he had Devante Parker in front of him, and he was lined up behind him. And he ran the route, and I think Parker was on a streak, and I think Waddle was on a post. He stayed behind Parker for about 5 yards and not like upright running and then breaking to the post, but he was like behind him as if he was hiding behind Parker so the corner couldn't see him. And at the last minute, busted out on the post and got that ball. It's those little intangibles that this guy has that makes him that dangerous that people are like, we need to take him out of the game. That's like when him and Gesicki are on the field at the same time, the opposing defense has to decide who are we taking out of the game this week. We doubling Gesicki or we doubling Waddle? Because if you pick one, we're going to use the other. So it's the little intangibles that make Waddle so good.
Well, and you bring up Mike Gesicki. Like, talk about, like, is he good? I mean, you good enough to kind of be the guy at tight end, or are the Dolphins eventually going to need to find someone? I mean, talk about his maybe growth and maybe where he needs to grow even more.
Gesicki needs to grow more in the blocking aspect of it. And I talked about this on another podcast where he could be a top 3 tight end in the NFL. Like I think he's top 5, maybe even top 6. And what's hurting him from breaking that barrier, because you have Kelsey, you have Mark Andrews, you have Kittle. These guys can block as well as get out on the field and get open, find the open zones. Like the drive that got the Kansas City Chiefs into the Super Bowl, got them into, the overtime against the Bills. He was like, if they're running that same play, I'm going to find that empty spot and get it to me. Do it, Kels, do it. We all heard the story.
Mm-hmm.
With Gesicki, he has those football smarts, but it's the blocking. When he was on the field, it kind of gave a tell to the defense, oh, they're not going to run the ball. And then when they took him off the field, it gave the tell to the defense, oh, they're going to run the ball. His snap ratio is ridiculously wide receiver based. He had, out of 828 snaps, he had 99 in line up against the tackle. That's only 11% of his snaps. And the slot, 453 snaps, and out wide, 252. So for 85% of his snaps, he was in the wide receiver position. So is that because of the co-offensive coordinators? Can Mike McDaniel and, Ryan Smith, I think his name is, change that? Can John Embry, the new tight end coach, mold him into a Kittle? Can he teach him to block? I don't know. It's been 4 years, and he really didn't get much better at blocking. So that's the only thing that's holding him back. Other than that, he's dynamic. He has like the most ridiculous catch radius. You throw anything his way, he's going to catch it. He's just that good and dangerous. But can he block?
And, and with that, a lot of it, I mean, you talked about, coaching, and a lot of that is, scheming, to their strengths. Right. And when you look at, maybe the new coaching staff, what are you looking for them to do offensively? I mean, because really, nationally, when you kind of look back, the Dolphins seem to turn around or winning. I don't know if that, how much that was on coaching, or schedule or what. Will this new coaching staff kind of maybe add to that, Gesicki or even like Jaylen Waddle that will kind of help them to even take the next step?
I'm interested to see what Mike McDaniel can do. I was watching a lot of the stuff he did with San Francisco and a lot of his run schemes, and some of it just shows how much football knowledge Mike McDaniel has.
Mm-hmm.
There was one play I was watching where they were in it was like a strong formation where essentially Kittle was set up as a fullback, and they were running the ball to the right, and they had Debo come in motion. So Debo was set up to the right, and he was coming in motion, and they had Kittle go out, like motion out as if he was going to line up as a tight end and then come back. So the defense thought they're going to run it to the right. Here comes Debo to his left. And what Kittle did was he motioned out, and then he curved around and followed Debo, and Debo got the handoff. And the whole defense ran one way to stop the run, and Kittle went and circled back. It's just, there's another play where Kittle's out at wide receiver, and the corner's noticing, and he's pointing it. So the safety comes over. They motion Debo over that way. All of a sudden, another corner follows him. A linebacker follows him. They run the ball the opposite way. That's 4 defenders that are on the complete opposite side of the field. And so these are the things that you watch it and you just think to yourself, Mike McDaniel's like, I don't want to use that word genius. We use it with Adam Gase, right, and it kind of
yeah.
But he knows what he's doing, and he knows how to take away your best defender. So I'm interested to see what he can do with that on offense. The defense worries me. That's where Brian Flores' bread and butter was, and that is the reason why the defense was so good. But people forget, there was the whole controversy of who called the plays this year, who called the plays during 1-7, who called the plays during 8-1, who was the one who turned the defense around. But people forget that Josh Boyer was the defense coordinator in 2020 when we had a better defense. So I'm worried about the defense taking a step back and the offense taking a step forward. I would prefer the defense to stay where it is and the offense take a step forward, because the offense was pretty bad. So taking a step forward brings them like to mediocre. So you win more games.
Tell you what, yeah, our on our NFC North podcast, we talked about coaches, and the Vikings. Our Vikings guy definitely wanted Mike McDaniel to be the coach, because of that, just how intelligent he is and everything. And when you look at it, maybe the Dolphins were the best spot for Mike McDaniel. When you have like a Jaylen Waddle, he
Hmm.
can, maybe be like a Debo Samuel. I don't know, I want to say clone, but he can fit that role, right?
Yeah, and a name that you haven't heard because the Dolphins stashed him away this year, Lynn Bowden Jr.
Yeah, from Kentucky. Yeah.
That running back wide receiver hybrid. I'm hearing expect him also to be in that lane of Debo where he might be in the backfield as a running back, going to split him out at wide receiver. But Mike McDaniel is just enamored and in love with Jaylen Waddle. Like they asked him, who should we draft in fantasy? It's Waddle. Like so. I'm in, and the thing I'm most interested to see is, he knows what he's doing on offense. I want to see who he brings in. For the longest time, the Dolphins, what they didn't know what they were doing on offense, especially the
Mhm.
offensive line. Very interested to see who Mike McDaniel brings on the offense and the offensive line. Because to me, I'm a trenches guy. You win in the trenches. I got to
Mhm.
see what he does with that offensive line.
Well, and obviously with that as well, running back. I mean, what do you make of this position on the Dolphins, present and future at the running back spot?
Right now, the Dolphins have one running back under contract, and that's Myles Gaskin. Other than that, everyone's a free agent. Duke Johnson and Philip Lindsay, when we brought them in, I was excited. It was something different, something new. And Duke Johnson went off. I don't know if it was the Miami air getting back in his lungs, but Duke Johnson went off when he got the chance. Philip Lindsay was fantastic on third downs, especially helping with the blocking. I'd like to bring those two back. I would really like to bring Duke Johnson and Philip Lindsay back. But I also want that every down back. I want that Derrick Henry, and that's easier said than done because everyone wants that Derrick Henry. But that's like the Alvin Kamara, Cook. I want that running back that for three downs you can hand this guy the ball and he's going to eat. Um, and that's what we didn't have with Brian Flores because Brian Flores brought that Patriot mentality of running back by committee. You had a good week, all right, you're going to get the ball. So I'd like to see that happen. Dolphins are drafting 29th overall, so I don't know what they're going to do with that draft pick. I don't know like what's there, but I'd like to see addition. Cordell Patterson maybe, and then potentially draft one as well. I want to add talent to the running back core, but it'll all be mute if they can't get an offensive line to open lanes up because it was so bad. The offensive line was so bad last year.
Yeah, and with them being so bad, I mean, we have Duke Johnson. You have these players that actually did well. I mean, Gaskin, he doesn't, scare you
Mhm.
necessarily. But when you look at, what they did, I mean, obviously, if they even added to that line, they could definitely be a powerhouse there.
Yeah, and to me, what I'm really interested in and I want to add to is the center position and one of the tackles. I think the Dolphins do have a core there on that offensive line that's young that can be built up. And Robert Hunt, Solomon Kinley, even Liam Eichenberg, who started at right tackle, went to left tackle, he struggled a little bit. But I think, worst case, they kick him back into guard or because his biggest knock coming out of college was he has short arms. So I wouldn't be upset with him going to guard. But tackle, especially right tackle. Jesse Davis got to go. I'm sorry. If there's a
Well,
Jesse
and
Davis
you brought
there.
up center, and he may be there. My guy Tyler Linderbaum out of Iowa.
Mhm.
I mean,
If
that'll be.
I'm free agency. I'm picking up that Tampa Bay Buccaneer center if he hits the
Mm,
streets because geez, is he a beast up to the center to get the run game going, and not
mhm.
only that, but to have your offensive line be like fluid. You need that general in the middle and the center. People underestimate how important a center is to let the rest of the line know. Like you'll see that a lot of times. They got the hand on the ball and they're pointing. They're essentially letting the rest of the line know, watch out for him or him. Last time we had that was Mike Pouncey, and we had a pretty good offensive line in 2016.
When you look at, we talked about Jaylen Waddle. What do you make of the rest of the Dolphins wide receiver room? I mean, you got Devante Parker, Fuller, who's was injured. I mean, what do you make of that group for the Dolphins?
It had so much promise.
Hmm.
When the season started, I was so apprehensive about it, and I even talked about, positions of the Dolphins that need to step up. And I said wide receivers, and I got so much flack for it from my subscribers. But I said it because you looked at every receiver we had, and they were injury prone. Will
Hmm.
Fuller, Devontae Parker, Albert Wilson, Preston Williams. And all 4 of those guys I named missed games this year. So it's
Mhm.
like it had so much promise. If Will Fuller never broke his finger because of Jacoby Brissett, if Devante Parker could have just stayed healthy like 2019, Preston Williams has never stayed healthy since we
Mhm.
undrafted him. Uh, you know, and you had Jaylen Waddle, who had an ankle problem coming out of college, played the whole year, never
Mhm.
missed the game. So it's like, it's the injury problem. And I get a lot of people asking me, hey, did you go after Saquon Barkley? Did you go after Christian McCaffrey? And I'm like, those are big, sexy names, but no, because I'm tired of going after injury-prone players. Because as Dolphin fans, that's what we do, and then they get injured. Like with our luck, we would have picked up J.J. Watt last year, and all of a sudden he would have got injured. So it had so much promise, but the injuries are just too much. And all of a sudden you had Tua playing with backups of backups. So it was bad.
And you brought up the defense, that for the last couple of years, I mean, that kind of has been a strength. I mean, what happened this year, and maybe what are you looking for into next year? Maybe some of the key players, and then maybe even needs.
It seemed like when the Dolphins went 1-7, there was a few games that the defense actually played pretty well, held the team. The first week against the Patriots, held them to, I think it was 16 points. So the defense played well in spurts, but they're mostly against like the Raiders, against the Colts, against the Bucks. They kind of, and then the Bills, they kind of faltered and let them blow the door wide open. From what I'm hearing, like especially from players like Xavier Howard and Jerome Baker, that all of a sudden that second Bills game, they started calling 2020 style Dolphin defense. And I'm like, you took 7 weeks to change it back after losing 6 games straight. You now all of a sudden want to change it back. And to the point where even Jerome Baker came out and said, Flores and Boyer and all them came up to me and said, listen, we're going to put you back at outside linebacker. We're not going to keep you at middle linebacker anymore. We're going to put you in the position that essentially got him a contract extension. And you saw all of a sudden he started getting sacks like crazy. He started eating. And the defense woke up, beat the Baltimore Ravens. It surprised everyone on the national television.
Mm-hmm.
That there is what bothers me and what made me start to think, can Brian Flores be a head coach? And
Mm-hmm.
can he be successful? Because why did it take him so long to change back to that defense that was working for you? And there was other things that he didn't do that it took forever for him to change. And I don't. That's where I started questioning Brian Flores.
Well, yeah, and let's kind of get into that a little bit. And it's kind of a messy situation, still kind of ongoing. Yeah, I've heard from different Dolphins fans and podcasters that they weren't necessarily a fan. I mean, uh, what do you make of the situation? In the past, and then maybe even going forward. I mean, you said defensively, you were questioning him as well.
Yeah. So when Brian Flores came in 2019, they tore it down, and I wasn't against it. Everyone thought they were tanking. I didn't think they were tanking. You can't tell a team to purposely lose. You can't
Mm-hmm.
tell a coach to purposely lose.
No.
It's stupid. And even if you want to say that the Bengals were tanking, I disagree with that. So 2019, they tore it down to the studs, and they were building their team, which I was for. I'm like, all right, do what you got to do. And look what they did with Laramie Tunsil. They got how many first round picks?
Mm-hmm.
So then came 2020, 5-11 to 10-6. So all of a sudden you're saying to yourself, trust the process. This guy knows what he's doing. Look how he turned this team around. So this past off season, that's what I kept saying to myself. Trust the process. You got rid of Kyle Van Noy. Trust the process. You get rid of Eric Flowers. Trust the process. Ted Karras, Bobby McCain. I'm like, trust the process. Trust the process. He knows what he's doing. 10-6, 5-11, 10-6.
By the way,
And then,
just one aside,
yeah,
I'm actually Facebook friends with Ted Karras's dad, so that's
it,
yeah. But
it,
go
it,
ahead. Sorry.
so I'm thinking to myself, trust the process. He knows what he's doing. He trusts these young guys. He probably has watched them play. He knows. Then we beat the Patriots, and you're like, oh, trust the process. And then we started to lose, and the offensive line looked bad, and the team looked bad, and then all of a sudden you start to question what he did, because especially on the offensive line, that was the biggest thing going into the season that scared the crap out of me, because you had Austin Jackson at left tackle, second-year starter. You had Solomon Kinley at left guard, second-year starter. You had Michael Dieter at center, first-year starter. Robert Hunt. Like, you had all these young, and then you had Jesse Davis, who hot garbage. So your offensive line was bad. You get rid of all your veteran leadership, and all of a sudden now you're losing, and you're losing, and you're losing. And it took him weeks to get Austin Jackson out of left tackle to left guard. He never, even when he hurt the quarterback, took Jesse Davis out of right tackle. Never did it. So it's like, these are the things that I started thinking to myself. He's not making the decisions that need to be made to win these games, to make this team better. He actually made the team worse. And a lot of people think that, you went 10-6, you overachieved. Not really. If he would have kept a lot of the veteran leadership, if Changeli would have stayed around, you don't have two offensive coordinators because you can't build an offensive staff, Dolphins would have won. So that's where I started questioning him. And that's where I started thinking to myself, once they lost to the Falcons after losing to the Jaguars, I said, someone needs to get fired. I don't care who it is, if it's the head coach, if it's defense coordinator, offense coordinator, someone needs to get fired. No one got fired till the end of the year. And then all of a sudden, he goes on a 7-game winning streak, which is the first time in NFL history. And people forget that we started 1-7, and people forget the blunders of the 1-7 start. And then when he got fired, everyone's like, he went 8-1, 2 back-to-back winning seasons. How are you going to fire him? 3 years. How many first-round draft picks? How many second-round draft picks? How many cap space? And it's been 3 years and no playoffs.
Yeah, and obviously with the lawsuit and everything, the narrative has changed a little bit. But I like the points that you brought up, and what I wonder as well, when you look at some of the things, maybe even being hard headed to change, that almost seems like the Patriot way. Kind of seeping into it, because that's why Matt Patricia famously failed with the Lions, just being hard headed and thinking you could take the Patriot way and it's going to work. And sometimes you just kind of have to look at the story, the narrative, and look at it. Maybe he's not a head coach because of who he learned under, and you can look at Bill Belichick all day, and he is definitely one of the greatest of all time, but maybe that just doesn't translate to other organizations.
100%. And you hit the nail on the head, especially Matt Patricia. Josh McDaniels with Denver, he just signed with the Raiders. He came out and said, the reason I failed in Denver is I was hard to work with. That came out of Josh McDaniels' own mouth. And people are, because a lot of it's rumor, right? Dolphins fire Brian Flores, then these sources come out. Hard to work with. He yelled at, but he had favorite players. The argument with Tua in the locker room. It's all sources and rumors, and I tend to not believe one or the other because we don't know the truth. But if Josh McDaniels himself comes out and says, I was hard to work with, and which made it hard to be successful in Denver, then you have Changeli, when he said he backed away, was football's a lot, but he also said he didn't feel like dealing with the arguing and the pushing of the. You just take these puzzle pieces, you put them together, all of a sudden you start to see the picture a little bit there. So, right now he's the I think the assistant defensive coordinator and linebackers coach for the Steelers. So he got a job. But I will say this to kind of talk a little bit about what's going on with the lawsuit and stuff. I think the Rooney Rule is dumb. I think it's incredibly dumb. I think to implement that rule and people just take advantage of it.
Yeah.
You have your guy you want, crap the Rooney Rule, bring in this minority and let's just talk to him. And I bet you he went through some type of process where he went in for an interview and they didn't want him. They had a guy they were waiting for, and they probably were sitting there just like twiddling their fingers while he's pouring his heart out saying, this is how I'm going to save your team. So I hate the Rooney Rule. I think the Rooney Rule is so dumb. I think the best candidate should get the job, period. And it's dumb. There's a ton of coordinators out there that should have been head coaches by now.
I totally agree. And what you can, just look at it, that the teams that are making the dumb hires, regardless of race, right? The Giants, that's organizationally, that should be dealt with. I mean, as far as, okay, well, they're, and unfortunately they won a couple of Super Bowls. So, they don't necessarily win, or, you can't change their mind, but it's going to be interesting, what more changes can be done, because really it's in the hands of owners. And when you look at, everything that owners can do, I mean, do you see, is there any way that Stephen Ross loses the Dolphins because of this whole thing?
If Brian Flores, because here's the thing with Stephen Ross, right? The way Flores got fired, it looks bad, especially it looks bad with now the lawsuit. But if Steven with him, the problem with him is not a race issue. The problem with him is the betting issue, and I'll give you $100,000 every game you lose.
Yeah.
If Brian Flores, because from what I'm hearing, again, sources, rumors, yada
Yeah.
yada. From what I'm hearing, it's they have corroborating witnesses that have overheard, or yes, I've heard this has been talked about and said. He needs physical proof.
Yeah.
If he can have text messages or emails saying, from Greer saying, what did you think about what, Stephen Ross said to you? Or what did you think about the proposal of losing, if he has that and he can show it, Stephen Ross is cooked. He's done. Because, people want to talk about Snyder and say, well, Snyder didn't have to force to lose his team. And this is going to sound horrible because I have a daughter. But what he did and the allegations he's dealing with don't affect the integrity of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Paying your coach to lose, especially when you have stake in gambling sites, affects the integrity of the game. And the NFL cannot sit back and let it happen and smack Stephen Ross on the wrist by taking away draft picks and fining him and still have him be the head coach if it's true and there's proof and it can be proven, because it affects the integrity of the game. Because now all of a sudden it goes all the way to Vegas, it goes all the way to betting, it goes all the way to extortion and stuff like that, where Stephen Ross is in deep trouble. So if that comes out, I'm like 90% sure that Stephen Ross won't be the owner anymore.
Yeah, because it's different than maybe not playing the players, sitting people. This is literally like paying your coach, or I mean, because it's interesting. You look back and it's in hindsight is 2020 of the Sean Payton stuff. I don't know if that's really talked about as much now, but the movie Home Team is out and he kind of brings it back to forefront. It's weird looking back at some of the national shows that just were all against him, and you think back, like he lost a year for paying players to hurt other players. So yeah, I mean, in this would even eclipse that.
Yeah, because it's huge. It's kind of on par with the refs in the NBA and how that all came to be. And he supposedly has a successor, because obviously he's not getting any younger. So he has somebody and I'm hearing that he also might, he lawyered up as well as Stephen Ross. So, and I find out who it was, and I forgot his name, but he's another New York real estate businessman. And I'm like, can I just get a guy who likes football? Like, can I
tell you what? Yeah, as a Bears fan, and I bet in that same boat. I mean, finally in the front office, we have a general manager who is a football guy. And for a while, I mean, you look at these owners, and for the most part, they're not football people. They have all their money. They've real estate or whatever, what other venture. And it's so weird to see some of these owners who have done so well in business just really fail and choose the wrong people to lead these franchises.
And you look at the teams that have history of success and are consistently successful, and their owners have that heritage, right? Like, look at the Giants. They've owned the Giants for decades, and the Steelers, they've owned that team for decades. They know how to run a football team. They're not, somebody else that are running it. So,
well, and you bring that up, and the Bears have that history, but they've done the exact opposite, because they have not, yeah, they just haven't had the proper organization. They have a board and its family, and not people that are going to be there to give them the hard questions and answers that maybe they need to turn things around, and hopefully the Bears are going to do that. And when you look at the Dolphins, say Tua does really start to grow, and with all the pieces that they have, realistically, how far away from the Super Bowl would you say the Dolphins are right now?
If Tua can play out, so I'll say this, because this is what I constantly hear. If if we can get the Alabama Tua Tagovailoa, and we can get a decent, and I'm not even talking like top 5, if we can get a decent offensive line, and if the defense can stay like it did the end of last year in 2020, they're not that far away. And I know I'm going to get flack for saying, oh, you don't think the Dolphins are far away from the Super Bowl? They're not. They're not. Look at what the Rams did, right? How many
Mhm.
years did it take of them just adding superstar?
Mhm.
They got their Super Bowl, They're not that far away. I talk about quarterbacks that have won it. Nick Foles. Where is he
Mhm.
now? He won a Super Bowl beating the New England Patriots. So it's a lot has to do with the quarterback, but it's not everything because I've
Mhm.
seen Deshaun Watson go 4-12 with the Houston Texans, and this past year they went 5-12. So it's important, but it's not everything. So I think they have a good foundation on the defense if it can stay consistent like it's been.
Mhm.
And if the offense can take that step and score some points and stop being, bottom dwellers on their stats, you'll be surprised once once you get in the playoffs. It's any given Sunday. You won and done. So there can be some surprises there.
Even with the Bengals, Joe Burrow got all the publicity, right? But their defense was the one that really, I mean, they stepped up versus the Chiefs and they stepped up versus the Titans. And, so their defense really was a factor as well.
They had a good core on that defense,
Hmm.
consistently getting pressure, getting after Mahomes. Mahomes was not the same guy in the second half. They did very
Hmm.
good at making halftime adjustments. Yeah, Joe Burrow was getting sacked for his life, but he really didn't have to do much. They didn't really ask him to do much, especially with the run game they had. People forget that. Yeah, he got sacked a ton, but they didn't put the game on his shoulders, which is good for a rookie. You put playoff games and you put championship games on his shoulders. Look, some people will crumble. So yeah,
And when you look at the Dolphins and when you look at, everything that they need, I mean, next year is not going to be maybe maybe I don't want to speak out of turn. Next year's not. We'll just say next year's not going to be a Super Bowl run.
no, I love it, but
So
no,
and maybe next year's not a playoff run. Could be,
maybe
could be, right? So
they were
what
close twice.
they were, so and with that innovative coaching, maybe they can do a little bit more. So when you look at 2022, what would be maybe your benchmark to see? Okay, this team is heading in the right direction. I mean, that the new coaching staff is going to get at least a year, 2, 3, maybe. What would your benchmarks be to say, okay, I see some positive, things out of this team where I can have some hope that they are headed in the direction of the Super Bowl.
So Mike McDaniel's inheriting a back-to-back winning season team, right? He has about 24 free agents that are going to hit the market. And you look at the list, and there's not a lot of sexy people on that list. A lot of the sexy guys, Xavier Howard, Jaylen Waddle, a lot of the guys that you associate with the Miami Dolphins, besides Gesicki and Emmanuel Ogba, are not free agents. So he's inheriting a very good team that just needs better coaching, especially on the offensive line, which they brought in with Applebaum, who had the second best offensive line in Boston College in the league in the nation. Um, the Dolphins have the most cap space right now. They're sitting at about 70 something million or 60 something million. And I did some of my cutting. We all like to do that. YouTubers were
Mhm.
like, "This is who I'd cut," and they're not going to cut them, and we're going to look like dummies. And the Dolphins could get to about 80 something million in cap space, and that is even before the proposed inflation of the cap space. So they could be sitting at potentially $100 million in cap space. And Chris Greer is very smart with his money. That's how we got to where we're at now. They have, 2 firsts next year, which they could use this year. You never know. There's pieces that need to be implemented. And if Mike McDaniel, which again, I'm very coy on him, I don't want to say anything until I see stuff.
Mhm.
If he can take this 9-8, 10-6 team, and if he can turn the offense around, and if he can make Tua into something, or do whatever at the quarterback position, I can see the Dolphins making the playoffs this year. They were 2 times 1 game away. Either they lost to the Bills horribly, or this year with an absolute horrid game plan and 15-mile-an-hour snow, rain, wind, decided to throw the ball 40 times. Lost to the Tennessee Titans, knocked them out of the playoffs. If he is who we thought he was in Mike McDaniel, I don't see why they can't 10, 11 wins, get to the playoffs. That being said, though, I have lower expectations, but he's inheriting a good team. So if he is as good as people are advertising, because he wasn't my top choice, let's just get that out there. Mike McDaniel was not my top choice. I wanted the experience. I wanted Doug Peterson. I
Oh,
wanted
really?
Jim Harbaugh. I wanted the experience. I wanted the guy who's been to the Super Bowl already. Knows how to get there, knows the mistakes he made, had not to do them, get there.
Harbaugh might have been more like Flores. He definitely
Oh,
has that
100%.
history of yeah.
Greer
So
would have gotten fired if Jim Harbaugh got brought in, and for a fact that all the rumors came out, and Greer was like, "Mike McDaniel's coming in. Mike McDaniel. You see Mike McDaniel over there? I don't want to get fired, please." But I wanted that. I wanted,
mm,
even Dan Quinn. When they interviewed Dan Quinn, I'm like,
mm.
he's been there. He knows 28-3. It's burned in his head. He wants to avenge 28-3. But my first choice when it came to inexperienced head coach was Mike McDaniel. I like what he does, and I think he's smart. So if he can take that smarts and put it together, and this offensive staff can put it together, I don't see why not. And looking at the schedule, we play the North, we play you guys, so we'll be collabing again. Packers might not have Aaron Rodgers. Vikings might not have Kirk Cousins. Detroit's Detroit. You guys know about Detroit. They're Detroit. The north of the AFC isn't as scary. Dolphins already beat the Ravens that always punch them in the mouth. Who do the Steelers have at quarterback? Joe Burrow. Okay, I'll give Joe Burrow. The Browns are falling apart. This is what I'm saying. And I'm not predicting anything, but I don't see why not. If Mike McDaniel is who he says he is.
So, with nationally, we talk about the cap space and all these teams that have cap space. And as a Bulls fan, back in the day, it takes me back to the summer of when they thought they were going to get LeBron, or they had all this money, they're going to throw it at and all these players are going to come, and we end up getting Carlos Boozer, right? So when you think of like free agents and in places they want to go and destinations, it's not just about cap space and the teams that have the most cap space. And of course they can throw a ton of money, but there are teams that are going to want to go places, for the destinations like Los Angeles, or,
Yes.
If there's a good to great quarterback, or at least a settled quarterback position, what, would tell you about the Dolphins, that would lure free agents to Miami. And even with this whole unsettled situation with Brian Flores, I mean, is that going to turn some free agents off, to want to go there because of that? Or, I mean, maybe this whole new thing with McDaniel is coach, is that going to be enough to lure free agents?
It's a good question, because obviously if a free agent like Adam, right? If say Aaron Rodgers with his cryptic message the other day, and then Pat McAfee show, it's just a nightmare. But say he stays with the Packers, right? You probably would think Adam's going to stay with the Packers, versus if Miami's like, we'll give you whatever you want. He's like, I'll take a pay cut to stay with the Packers because I'm going to be getting Aaron Rodgers to throw me the ball, versus I don't know Tua Tagovailoa from a hole in the wall. So yeah, there's a ton of things, but you have to think about the players talk to each other, right? And the players love Mike McDaniel from his time with Washington, from his time with Atlanta, from his time with the 49ers. Kittle FaceTimed Mike McDaniel on the sideline during the Pro Bowl. So it's like,
Love it.
they like Mike McDaniel is a player's coach. As much as people look at him and think he's a nerd and how is he going to lead a team and yada yada, he's already started leading these players in different organizations. But yeah, if the Dolphins have to compete against teams that have, aspirate like the Chiefs or the Bengals or the Chargers, it's going to be hard because of the question mark that is Tua Tagovailoa. Like, we don't know who.
Oh, I think I lost you there. Kind of froze there. Yeah, when you look at it, you don't really know, what Tua is. We don't know, and kind of going forward. It'll be interesting just to, see when you look at just the whole situation, as far as, the Dolphins and, you know, just kind of, looking forward to it. Looks like we lost you. Hopefully, maybe we can get you back here. But when you look at free agents, you have all that cap space, and hopefully there would be an opportunity for them to just really look at the offense and see what their fit is. And obviously when you look at, I mean, money definitely talks as well. But with the Dolphins, you know there's a lot to kind of look forward to, I think we lost Doug there, but we'll see if he comes back on. Oh, here he is. We got him back.
Sorry,
We got you back.
I got disconnected.
No, that's happened to me before, and I've had to people actually go ahead and take over the interview until I get back on. So
yeah, so essentially you hit the nail on the head. But I think, if Mike McDaniel can and show why he is who he is, playing in Miami, pay taxes in Miami,
right,
and you have the potential of playing with Waddle, with Xavier Howard, with Byron Jones, with these young up and coming guys. I think also sprinkle a little extra money on top of it. I think some free agents would want to come here and win. But I think the superstar guys, like I don't think Devante Adams is going to go to Miami. I just don't see it happening because he wants that. But I think the Dolphins can lure some offensive linemen, some big offensive linemen, somewhat like you're the wide receiver that you guys potentially might lose. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah,
I'm gonna take over real quick.
Do it. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on him? Because I'm hearing some Bear fans saying, take him because he has done nothing for us.
So I'm on the camp, yes and no. Like I love Allen Robinson from a couple years ago, and part of it, was the coaching, and he was misused and everything, but he definitely quit this past year. He was, and he was, kind of throwing a tantrum, here and there, so I still think he is a top wide receiver, and whatever team gets him is going to get him on a steal this year because of his production.
Gotcha.
And I don't. So the biggest thing with him, right, is with Justin Fields, first year, Allen Robinson gets NFL open, and Justin Fields didn't quite understand or trust that yet.
Yeah.
And that's why
I know that.
yeah. And so he went to Darnell Mooney, and the Bears, like I said, I mean, they're Allen Robinson is moving on. Bears will need a number one wide receiver because Mooney is not that, so if the Dolphins went and signed him, that might be an interesting mix there with Waddle. I mean, obviously it depends what they would do with the rest of the wide receiving core, but I like him. I like what he could bring when he's motivated. We'll just say that.
Yeah, and maybe we'll send you Devante Parker if you want him.
I do not. Yeah, I don't. And you brought up the whole stuff with Devante Adams, right? And so we go back and forth with the Packers, my Packers person, and even our Lions / Dolphins guy, and he said, Devante Adams, he is top 2-3 wide receiver, if not the best in the league. I mean, Cooper Kupp, whatever, we can kind of go back and forth, but Devante Adams is an amazing talent. I do not think the Bears, whereas I would love him to be on the Bears just to troll the Packers, right? With what he's going to cost and with where the Bears are at right now, I don't want him to be on the team because they're not ready to move that next step where you can spend all that money can go other places, and the Bears need a lot. They need a lot. And so I do see it will be interesting to see where he signs. And as a Bears fan, if the Packers go all in on Rodgers and Adams, I think they're screwing themselves long term. And when you look at some of the other teams that have done that, the Falcons, some of these other teams, I mean, they're just they're not going to be able to field a competitive team because of some of those issues. And so it'll be interesting, and it's tough, and you talked about the Dolphins, tearing it down and going to the studs. That's a tough thing. And I remember I've talked to a few different Packer fans, and they said they're not ready to lose yet.
Yeah.
And, as a Dolphins fan, I mean,
we've been losing.
Right. And when you're at that point, I mean, so now you've had some winning seasons. And so how much of a leash, I guess last question here, like how much of a leash do you think Tua gets within this year and next year? And if he doesn't produce, are they just going to have to move on?
I say this a lot, and it sucks to say it because I always think quarterbacks should get a chance. This is it. This is going to be Tua's last year, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Other people might think differently. I think this is it. I think now he's going to be brought things that are going to, because the Dolphins have come out and publicly made it known we are going to do our best to build around Tua. They didn't say it like exactly like that, but that's what they're doing now. This is it. You're going to get the offensive line, you're going to get the weapons that you need, and you're going to get a guy who's going to install a playbook that's going to benefit you. Can't be making these dumb mistakes. You can't be inconsistent. You need to work on your footwork, all that stuff. They bring in Bevel, all these guys. So this is it. And if he does it, the Dolphins have 2 first-round picks next year to either trade for the quarterback they want or draft the quarterback they want, because this is the thing that people don't understand. Head coaches are attached to the quarterback they draft. Trubisky,
Absolutely.
So a lot of people want to come out and say, "Oh, Flores didn't want Tua." BS. I call flat out BS, because if he didn't, then he wouldn't have drafted him. And you could say that the Ross and Greer wanted him, then Flores is dumb, and I don't want him as my head coach if he's going to sit back and let somebody else dictate the future of his career. So Mike McDaniel, Tua is not Mike McDaniel's quarterback. He needs to prove it this year. If he doesn't prove it this year, I don't see him on the team next year.
It's interesting you bring up Deshaun Watson, and I did interview a Texans guy in the media, and he heard that in those interviews with Flores, that Flores was told that Deshaun Watson was not the guy. That regardless if he took the position, Deshaun Watson was out. And that's just kind of was the understanding, and maybe that's why Flores didn't get the job as well. But when you look at quarterback, you have to get it right sometime, or you're gone.
Yeah, 100%. And this, it used to not be that way. You could tell by how much they pay running backs now. It's now a quarterback league. Quarterbacks and wide receivers get a bulk of the money. Running backs barely make anything now. Like it's ridiculous. Back in the day with LaDainian Tomlinson, Ricky Williams, all those, they were making double figures in the millions, like 20, 15. They make like 8 if you're good. If you're real good, you make about 8 million a year. So it's a quarterback happy league, and you can tell by the penalties and stuff too. It's super quarterback heavy. And a lot of players look at it, a lot of teams look at it, a lot of fans look at it, that you need that quarterback to win. And Deshaun Watson's out there, and Deshaun Watson's going to be out there. I made this prediction on Twitter. His legal issues have not gone away. They're still there, and they're not going to go away because they're pushing things back.
I don't know why they're doing that. I mean, if he really wanted to play, you would try to get it resolved as soon as possible, right?
And it might get worse for him, because if he testifies, and if they might go to litigation. So he might not play this year, and he might not get drafted this year. So to all the Dolphin fans out there that have been banging the table for Deshaun Watson, you might get your wish if Tua doesn't show up this year, because he might be available next year. But I might be wrong. But he was supposed to already either been in the process of settling things or have settled things by now, and nothing has started. So
I don't know if I want 2 years of, no matter how talented a quarterback is, I don't know if I want 2 years of him not playing. I mean, you look at, the only other comp is, Michael Vick, and he was out 3 years, and he just was not the same quarterback. So.
And a lot of people think that the Texans will just release Deshaun Watson.
Oh.
If he gets cut, that is a $52 million dead cap hit to the Houston Texans. If they keep him on the roster, it's a $40 million cap hit. So it's like, do they want to eat $12 million and just cut him, or what do they want to do? And there's the rumors that the Dolphins had everything in place to get him last year. And for people to say that it was Flores who wanted him, I don't believe it. I think all 3 of them wanted him. And I think that now that it blew up in their face, they're kind of, we never wanted him. We're going back to us. So the whole Deshaun Watson situation, you'd be dumb not to pick up the phone. He's a top 5 quarterback in the league. So you'd be dumb. Anybody, like even the Bears, they'd be dumb not to pick up the phone for Deshaun Watson.
It's just tough when you think of how much you'd have to give up for him when things are not settled, and that's why it's going to be just an interesting situation here. Is you're right. I mean, he is a talented quarterback, and it's a quarterback driven league. So what team is going to be desperate enough to um, you know, make that move because Houston's not gonna um, fall off on their demands
Mm,
very much if at all. And the only thing is, where would a place be that you have someone else who is the face of the franchise where you don't have to worry about Deshaun Watson being the face of the franchise while he deals with this.
exactly. That's you hit the nail on the head there because say the Dolphins do trade for Deshaun Watson because Dolphins were always one of those teams because of the amount of first round picks they have in the next 2 years. We could throw 3 first round picks and the Texans don't have to wait for 3 separate years to use those first. So, but then all of a sudden you bring Deshaun Watson and now all of a sudden the face of your franchise has this huge cloud above his head and he might not even play even so say he gets everything situated, he gets all the litigation done, he's good. Dolphins make a trade for him, send 3 firsts, 2 twos, whatever it is. The NFL might come in and say, "All right, well, we just did our own investigation. You're suspended this year, and congratulations, Miami, you have no quarterback."
Not only that, if they don't have a quarterback and then he stinks, and then you don't get the benefit of having a top, draft pick because you just gave it away. So
Trust me, as a Dolphin fan, I know how that feels now because we all were laughing at the Houston Texans last year. We got your first round pick. It's now a third overall pick. You're dumb. Well, we traded ours to the Eagles, and now the Eagles have a top 15 pick, and we're all the way at
right,
29. No one thought the 49ers were going to go that far into the
right.
playoffs.
Well, this has been amazing. I definitely could talk, forever about football. I definitely appreciate your time. And where can everyone find you again?
You can check me out youtube.com/DouglieDoWrong, and on Twitter at DouglieDoWrong. If you need to find me anywhere, it's a very peculiar name. You can find me just by looking up DouglieDoWrong.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And is there one last kind of Dolphins? Is it a fins up? Right.
Yep, that's our motto. Fins up,
Thanks again, and we'll definitely connect again.
definitely.
Have a great night.